Hi, I'm Gianna White. I'm the Operations Director of March for Science NYC. And today I'm going to be interviewing Celine.
Hi.
Can you start by telling us just about a little bit about yourself and just what exactly it is that you do?
Yes, my name is Celine Semaan, and I am Lebanese living in New York. Um, I run an organization with my colleagues called Slow Factory. And part of the work that we do is working for the past decade on the intersection of climate justice and human rights, and particularly in the fashion industry. But since the fashion industry touches on several other industries, like agriculture, import, export, materials, manufacturing. We end up working across all of these industries. And so we work through material science, we develop new materials, we have a robust online open education um, forum, essentially, where over 100 instructors teach, um, you know, our students for free. We have about 28,000 students currently in the program, and we run several other projects, like, for example, the landfill as museums, which basically consists of an open learning environment where we take designers to the landfill and then we conduct what we call waste-led design workshops, where we think about the waste first when we're designing. And so this is a system design workshop where we're looking at regenerative systems.
That's all really impressive and it sounds really cool. I guess just to begin, you mentioned that you like to focus on fashion, or Slow Factory as a whole focuses a bit more on fashion. And you mentioned how it intersects with a lot of these other different sectors. Can you, I guess, just to speak a bit more about how much of a role like just one industry can have, and just the intersectionality of a lot of these things that we might consider to be separate?
Yes, of course. So, the challenge that we faced working within the fashion industry is, first, we're not from the fashion industry, so we had to make our way there. And the reason why we decided to work within the fashion industry was because it's such an influential industry as well as such a polluting industry. When you look at the amount of waste that's generated just from New York City alone per year, um, you know, um, we wanted to affect change locally, but also internationally as much as possible. And of course, we're looking at waste primarily because the fashion industry has such a great turnaround, or huge turnaround, should I say. There was an article recently in the Business of Fashion showing just the amount of styles that these fast fashion groups are releasing per season, and it's just impossible. Like, it just doesn't work when you're looking at how many humans there are on this planet, how much clothes we don't need that much, and we will certainly not wear that much, and these clothes will not all be sold. So what happens to the unsold goods? Where do they go? And so we started looking at all these things for the past 10 years on materials. For example, most of our clothes contain polyester, which is a plastic component, like a plastic fossil fuel, byproduct. Essentially, it leaches microplastics into the environment, as you know, and then it just, when it's discarded into landfills, it's just leaching more toxins into our environment. It does not decompose. It does not go back to the earth as food. And so we started looking at all these issues and looking at how can we affect change. And the only solution we saw possible was to work across industries, across these different industries. And so we started immediately researching and wanting to connect with, large waste groups. Waste management, for example, is one of our partners that we work with. And that's where the landfill as museums was able to be piloted, because we were able to access these landfills and show people that you're throwing clothes out into the garbage, and they're ending, this is where they end up. And if they're lucky, because most of the time they get shipped into the global south. Pakistan is one of the main like one of the main countries receiving waste. Ghana, there's also Vietnam. And so these countries are overwhelmed with textile waste that's coming from the global north because of the fast turnaround that we just talked about with the fashion industry outputting so much waste. And so, yeah, that's the focus we have mostly.
Yeah, that's really impressive and really thorough. So thank you for sharing that. And I guess the concept of waste that you keep mentioning it's becoming increasingly important, especially as we, especially in America, are a culture that overconsumes and we have a very large footprint in terms of waste. So a lot of these new ideas, especially in fashion, as you've been mentioning, on sort of reducing and the term that you used, waste-led solutions, was really interesting, and I liked it a lot. Just focusing on our output as opposed to as a new form of solution. So continuing like on the stream of like waste centered discussions, you kept mentioning just how large of a output the fashion industry has, and that's become more of a topic of conversation, at least in the mainstream these last couple of years, in terms of like upcycling materials and discussions on fast fashion as a whole. So do you have advice, I guess, just for the average consumer who is like starting to grapple with a lot of these new topics that are coming into like just the common media and forms of like discussion on where our clothes come from and how do I find out if my clothes are ethically sourced? Should I donate my clothes? Should I keep them and patch them up? Like what should we look at in terms of our own clothes and how we interact with fashion?
Yeah, those are great questions. I often hear like, what can I do? Well, the first thing, and I think this is a sentence by Ursula de Castro, who is one of the founders of the Fashion Revolution organization, and she says the most eco-friendly or sustainable item you can have is the one that's already in your closet. And so, for example, one of the things you could do is repair the items that you have. Upcycle them. If, for example, there's a stain, there's always ways to extend the life cycle of these items. For example, this week, not this weekend, but on Earth Day in New York on March 23rd, the day after Earth Day, we're doing an Earth Day celebration at the MoMA PS1, where we have 3 different stations. One is repair, one is upcycle, and one is a screen printing station. And on the repair station, we're going to teach folks how to repair small things that are totally repairable. It's just that we've lost this culture collectively. Like even sewing a button, I had to learn it, and had to figure out how to do that. So if anyone is interested to come to the MoMA PS1 on Saturday, April 23rd, bring any clothes that has a stain on it, that needs reparation, that needs alteration. There's going to be seamstresses that are going to provide support at no cost for everyone that wants to extend the life of their items. There's also lots of cool things that could be done, that have been going on for a few years now. It's swapping, like being able to select a few items in your closet that you're no longer happy with, and then organizing a swapping event with your friends, your peers, even your community. It could go larger. And then during swapping events, you bring in X amount of clothes and you return home with an X amount of clothes. And so it's kind of fun because what's no longer serving you can serve others. And this allows us to make sure that whatever clothes you don't want anymore don't end up in landfills, because the amount of clothes donated per year is really, really huge. Actually, I can maybe pull this out. I was in conversation with Goodwill, and they definitely, are overwhelmed by all of these donations that are occurring yearly, especially around the fall and around, the spring. There's, yes, so the EPA reports that Americans generate 16 million tons of textile waste a year, equaling over 6% of total municipal waste. That's not good. So
Yeah.
16 million tons. So that's a lot of clothes that we are throwing into this donation box that don't necessarily end up going into a cycle of resale. And the other thing is, of course, you can resell your own items on Depop, on eBay, on the Real Real, on what's it called? This other app. There's so many platforms right now that are like doing that. So there's also tie dyeing or natural dyes that you can do in the summer. I mean, I do know it needs time. You need to have time to take care of all these things. And oftentimes we are left with zero time on our hands, working 2 jobs, taking care of children. So I just want to say that, all of it does not rely on the shoulders of the citizen alone. It has to be it's a systemic issue, and it requires systemic change. And we've been saying that for the past decades, if not more. And what we really need is an industry solution and a governmental solution, so that the government could monitor and basically limit the industry on overproducing, and whatever they're overproducing, they are accounted for, taking care of it in a way that's not, throwing them out into the landfill or burning them, because those are the things they're doing now.
Yeah. That's a really good point, and especially since a lot of this conversation has centered on waste, do you think that just centering more policy and just trying to shift toward a more circular economy and industries that focus a bit more on generating as little waste as possible, is that something that you can see happening, not just in America, but like as a whole in different places?
Yes, definitely. So for sure, there is, the need to do policy work. There's so many policy groups right now looking into that. Actually, Fashion Revolution has a policy focus as well. There are new laws that are being pushed out as we speak. The problem that we see is that the supply chain of these organizations, of these brands, is super opaque. There's a group called SourceMap that just recently raised a lot of money, that are effectively mapping supply chain and identifying risks. So we need more of that type of transparency if we do want to impose any type of policy, because right now the policy is relying on whatever brands are showing. And then when we talk about circular economy, right now what we're seeing being implemented is the rental clothing solution, as well as the secondhand market, capturing that secondhand market with ThreadUp. That was the name I was looking for earlier. ThreadUp, eBay, the Real Real, and all of these groups that are popping up that are trying to capture that secondhand market. But in the circular economy, there's also a huge innovation around material science and new materials that are, being introduced as circular materials. And, the Slow Factory is working on one of these solutions. It's a leather alternative that grows from tea and coffee waste. But we're not the only ones. There's so many other groups that are looking into these types of materials. And the material industry has grown so much. I think in the past year, it has grown over $1 billion more than what it already is valued as, because it's a very hot market right now. For example, why is it so hot? Because we can't just rely on cotton or on polyester. Cotton, for example, is a very thirsty crop, as we say. It has been debated in the past, but aerial images of NASA show that, monocrop agriculture around the world is really creating erosion in the soil. And there's so much soil left for all of our food and agriculture around the world. We simply cannot rely so much on cotton or organic cotton alone, because it does require this type of monocrops. And that's what's very dangerous for our planet, because it's just not natural in the way that our ecosystem are being built. And plastic, of course, we all know plastic needs to be we need to divert from it at all costs, including polyester, even recycled polyesters. That's also the other problem with the circular economy and the buzzwords that come with it, is that the first thing that was popularized is the plastic bottles to leggings or to t-shirts or to sweaters, and these types of solutions that are in fact just popularizing more polyester. And yes, it's sure it's better to use whatever is already created, but at the end of the day, recycling plastic into soft goods, that's just one loop. At the end of the day, it's still plastic pollution, and it does not get decomposed. And once it's turned into a soft good like sweaters, there's no other way to do anything with it, so there isn't another life for it, you know what I mean? So it's just not a good solution in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. So being more conscious about waste generation and the materials that go into these objects and designs that we are producing and using on a daily basis, especially like you've mentioned with plastics, everything that we wear, from like our clothes to our shoes. You can't take a step without producing like microplastics nowadays. I did want to touch briefly on something that you mentioned earlier, when you said that we needed a cultural shift to sort of fight a lot of these large overarching paradigms that are causing a lot of this ecological destruction, and ask about one of the programs that you're working on. I believe it's called Study Hall. So how big of a role is like education, do you feel, like in what you're doing?
Absolutely. So we did start with Study Hall, which was the first, if you want, like climate conference in the fashion industry that really looked at climate justice and human rights together from a decolonial perspective, talking about anti-colonialism and the cost colonialism have done on our planet. Education is key for the progress of this movement, because we don't know what we don't know, right? Like if we don't know anything, we are more likely to not want to have an opinion on it, not want to be taking action on it. And climate change has been debated for over 40 years, whether or not it was a real thing or not. And so education is a crucial part of accepting that climate change is inevitable and figuring out solutions that are applicable immediately, on the short term, on the medium term, and on the long term, so that we can take action collectively. We're less likely going to take action if we're afraid of the subject, if we don't understand it, if we feel like we have no control over it. So that's why education is so crucial to the progress of this movement, and also, of course, to our collective well-being, because education empowers us, demystifies, destigmatizes a certain topic, removes the layer of fear, of guilt, of stigma and taboo that is around things like, for example, waste is a great example of how we were able to destigmatify that, like make it feel like it's not going to hurt you to look into waste, and it's not a hot potato syndrome where you're just hoping someone's going to take care of it when you're throwing it away. And with this level of knowledge comes a level of agency that is necessary, that we really believe is necessary for us to collectively move the needle on the progress that is needed.
Thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time to interview us today, Celine, and all the work that you and Soul Factory are doing. Is there anything that you wanted to plug, the events that you mentioned earlier?
No, I feel like that, the event on the 23rd is very important, and it's open for all. I can leave you with a link to the Eventbrite if you want to share. Everyone is welcome, especially if you're in New York City. Come, and if you're not, you can get inspired and maybe create a similar event, like a repair party or swap party. Of course, mobilizing locally is very, very important. There are so many things that need to be done on a local level, and local level really influences the global movements that we're building together. And there's also open education that's available to all, that's free, accessible, sustainability, literacy, that we offer at the Slow Factory. I'm going to also leave you with a link. And that's it for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.